After my parents had a car accident, I walked towards the operating table and had an abortion, getting rid of my second child with Morgan. At my parents' funeral, I called Morgan one after another. It was not until his childhood sweetheart, Hannah, answered the phone with an impatient tone. Morgan has gone to cut fruits. What do you want? Holding the urn in my arms, I said indifferently. It's nothing. Just tell Morgan when you've had your fun. I agree to the divorce. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. I stood alone in the crematorium, watching the only relatives I had in this world leave. At the same time, I also bid farewell to my aborted second child. All the people I loved deeply were sent by my own hands into that narrow cremation furnace. They turned into a handful of ashes. But I no longer cared. Soon, I would be dying too. My parents were both professors and had educated countless people. Many people came to their funeral. However, Morgan, my husband, who should have been there the most, was absent. A student who had been sponsored by my parents loudly scolded Morgan for his ingratitude in front of the tombstone. The looks they gave me were full of pity. They avoided me and whispered privately. Time reveals a person's true nature. Morgan used to act like a filial son, but I didn't expect he would turn out to be an ungrateful wretch. The doctor told me that I only had half a year left to live. I had unfortunately lost a child before. Since then, giving birth to Morgan's child had always been a longing in my heart. But in the end, I personally ended the life of the child. After all, considering Morgan's disgust towards me, perhaps it was a kind of luck for the child not to be born. I planned to spend the remaining half year of my life traveling around the world with the ashes of my parents and the child, and spending the rest of my life in the days without Morgan. Standing in front of my parents' tombstone, after much consideration, I decided to call him. The phone still went unanswered. The familiar voice echoed in my ears. The number you have dialed is busy. Please try again later. In the past, I would have broken down because of this. Now, I just felt exhausted. I dialed the number 13 times. When I was about to give up, the phone was answered. But it was Hannah, Morgan's childhood sweetheart, who answered. She asked me in a coquettish and accusing tone. Missy, it's impolite to disturb others while they're sleeping. It's 7 in the morning in London now. If it were in the past, I might have angrily scolded her. But now, my heart was as calm as water, and I just said lightly, I want to speak to Morgan. Hannah snorted coldly and looked very impatient. Morgan has gone to cut fruits for me. What do you want? Before I could answer, she sneered again. Aren't you meddling too much? We still have an important negotiation to prepare for. Morgan and I both need to rest. Just tell me what you want. I was silent for a while, my eyes falling on the urn in my arms, and I replied expressionlessly. It's nothing. Just tell him to come back when he's free to go through the divorce formalities. After saying that, without waiting for her response, I hung up the phone. I had deeply loved Morgan for 10 years and bound him with marriage for 5 years. But I ultimately failed to warm his heart. Now, I had completely given up. The next day, I received a call from Morgan. On the other end of the phone, Morgan's voice sounded impatient. Wendy, what are you up to this time? I'm telling you, Hannah is my colleague now. We went abroad for business. You deliberately called today and made Hannah cry. And you even said that you want to divorce me because of her. Is this really necessary? Hannah was the apple of Morgan's eye. And Morgan, who was usually shrewd in business, couldn't see through this obvious lie now. If it were in the past, I might have argued with him. But now, it didn't matter anymore. I gently wiped the portrait of my parents and replied calmly. Okay, then when will you be free to come back? Let's go through the divorce formalities. There was a sudden silence on the other end of the phone. I thought he was considering the issue of property division. So I comforted him. Don't worry, I won't ask for a single penny from you. I'll leave the marriage with nothing. Anyway, I didn't have much time left to live, and I didn't want any of Morgan's property. It would just make me feel sick. But Morgan gritted his teeth and said angrily, Wendy, you're hopeless. Give up this idea. I will never agree to a divorce. After saying that, he hung up the phone. I was stunned. Clearly, before going abroad, it was you who proposed the divorce. Wendy, don't be willful just because your family has shown kindness to me. If you keep acting so unreasonably, we might as well get a divorce. I had seen the divorce agreement in his study before. I had argued with him for several days about it at that time. He explained that it was a divorce agreement from his colleague and that he was just helping to take a look at it. I made him promise at that time that he would never let me see a divorce agreement again in this lifetime. Unexpectedly, this time, it was me writing the divorce agreement, and I was seriously considering getting a divorce. I knew that the reason he brought up the divorce was that Hannah accidentally broke the urn containing the ashes of my first child. I slapped her. When Morgan heard the commotion and rushed over, he showed a look of disgust when he saw the ashes on the ground. Hannah explained with a sob, "Morgan, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, I was just scared." After hearing this, Morgan slapped me in return for Hannah. He said in a disgusted tone, "The person is already dead. Why keep the ashes at home? It's so inauspicious." That was when I realized it was his child too, but just because I was the one who carried it. He loathed it so much. So on the day my parents passed away, I personally ended the life of our child. On that summer afternoon, my parents had just attended my cousin's wedding. They were driving and sharing the interesting stories of the wedding with me on the phone. I also informed them of the good news that I was pregnant, and they were very happy. When I hung up the phone and was about to send a message to Morgan to share the joy, I suddenly received a recording from an unknown number. In the recording, there was only Morgan's voice. He said, "Master and mistress have been so kind to me. I can never repay their kindness in this lifetime. If it weren't for them, I would have divorced a long time ago. Fortunately, Wendy's first child is gone. Otherwise, I really wouldn't know how to face her child." I was shaking all over. I had always known that Morgan didn't love me, but I never expected that he would loathe me to such an extent. I chose to admit defeat. At that moment, the last bit of love I had for Morgan vanished. I went straight to the hospital for an abortion, but I didn't expect that right after I got off the operating table. I received the news of my parents' death. Their car was rear-ended by a heavy truck, and they passed away. Morgan came home on the third day. I had just come back from the hospital with a bag of painkillers in my hand. The doctor saw that I still didn't have any family members with me and warned me not to make decisions on my own. I could hide it for a while, but not forever. I told the doctor that all my family members were gone, and there was no one in this world who cared about me anymore. I still remember the look of pity in the doctor's eyes. Although the weather was hot, my body was extremely cold. I tightened my coat and opened the door of the villa, only to see Morgan sitting on the sofa. When he saw me enter, he didn't get up. He pointed at the tea table as if teasing a puppy. "I bought gifts for you and Master in London. Come with me to visit Master and Mistress tomorrow." Even after 5 years of marriage, Morgan still called my father Master. I didn't know if it was out of respect for my father or if he wanted to distance himself from me. On the tea table was a tea set and a bag. "The tea set is for Master. The bag is for you." My father really liked making tea and things related to tea. After Morgan achieved success in his business, in order to please his master, he often collected famous teas and antique tea sets. The bag was a famous brand, but it was an old model. Hannah had already shown it off in her Instagram last year. Now I didn't care about it anymore. I ignored him and sat directly on the sofa on the other side, putting the medicine down. I was feeling extremely uncomfortable. Only then did Morgan notice my complexion and asked, "Why do you look so pale? Do you have a fever?" He got up and walked in front of me, frowned, and leaned closer to touch my forehead. When I saw him getting close, I instinctively dodged backward. He frowned when he saw my action. "I don't need Morgan's concern. I'm fine." I lowered my eyes and suddenly understood how Morgan had felt before. It turned out that when you don't love someone anymore, even coming up with topics to deal with them can be so tiring. "It's still early. We can still make it to the Civil Affairs Bureau now." I went back to the master bedroom to put the medicine away, and then took out the household register and went downstairs. Morgan's expression changed from surprise to helplessness and then to anger. "Wendy, have you had enough of this nonsense? You and I both know that as long as Master is alive, I will never agree to a divorce. Master has been so kind to me. If it weren't for his careful teaching, I might have starved to death on the streets long ago, let alone achieved what I have today. To prevent you from being jealous, Hannah was forced to study abroad since she was a child. I married you to repay their kindness. But why are you always acting so unreasonably? I don't understand why they would have such a selfish daughter like you." After he roared, he was like an enraged lion, with a ferocious expression. But I couldn't help but want to laugh, and I actually did laugh. My laughter made my whole body shake. causing severe pain in my abdomen, which had just undergone an abortion, and also made tears stream down my face. So, it was all my fault. Back then, Morgan's parents died in an accident, and his relatives at home snatched away all the family property. He couldn't even afford his tuition fees. My father felt sorry for him and took him to our home to live for a while. Hannah's family was snobbish and had long wanted to break up with him, but they instigated him to fight for the family property to support Hannah to study art abroad. My parents thought that Morgan was at a crucial moment and didn't want to delay his studies, so they paid for Hannah to study abroad out of their own pockets. As soon as Hannah got the money, she immediately broke up with him. I saw that Morgan was in a low mood, so I began to care for and take care of him. It was from then on that I fell in love with him, unexpectedly. Now, I realized that I had loved the wrong person. I laughed even more painfully, and my mouth was filled with the smell of blood. Indeed, it was my fault. I was completely wrong. Morgan seemed to be scared by my madness. He stared at me coldly and said through gritted teeth, "You're simply unreasonable. If you want a divorce, let Master tell me." Tears streamed down my face. I looked at him with bloodshot eyes and said, "Morgan, from now on, you don't have to bear the moral shackles anymore. You're free. My parents are dead, and we can get a divorce now." Morgan instantly flew into a rage, rushed in front of me, and slapped me. I was set flying by the huge force and fell to the ground. He still seemed to feel unsatisfied. He stepped forward and grabbed my collar, saying hatefully, "Wendy, I'm telling you, no matter how much you make trouble, I can tolerate it. If you want to divorce me and live with your lover, I can also let you have your way. But how dare you curse master and mistress? They are your own parents." Yes, Morgan, how could I curse my own parents? I loved them so much. I slumped my neck feebly. The heavy blow of the slap and the soreness all over my body made my mind go blank for a moment. I seemed to see my parents. I really felt like I was going to die. At this moment, a familiar ringtone of a mobile phone interrupted my thoughts and also Morgan's anger. It was the ringtone that Morgan had specially set for Hannah. Morgan slowly composed himself and answered the phone. On the other end of the phone, Hannah was crying and panicking. "Morgan, what should we do? Lana is hurt." Lana was the stray dog that she and Morgan had picked up together. Every time Morgan and I were alone for more than a day, Hannah would use Lana as an excuse to ask Morgan to go back. I watched as a trace of panic flashed in Morgan's eyes and couldn't help but sneer in my heart. After saying that, he ignored me and started packing up to leave. When he was putting on his shoes and about to go out, he turned around and looked at me suspiciously. I knew that he was wondering why I wasn't crying and making a scene like I usually did. No one would care about a passerby, where they were going, what they were doing, or how many people they were sleeping with. The only connection between me and him now was that we were still husband and wife. I didn't want to be called Mrs. Song after I died. I just hoped that he wouldn't delay our divorce. When I saw his gaze, I said calmly, "Go ahead. Just be at the gate of the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." Morgan's expression changed instantly. He took a deep breath, shook his head in a disappointed way, and said, "A bitter woman." Morgan ignored me and opened the door to go out. The moment he opened the door, he saw Uncle Jack and his wife outside. Uncle Jack's family had been good friends with my parents for many years, but they had already settled abroad. After learning the news of my parents' death, they specially came back this time. Uncle Jack looked sad and said to Morgan, "This must be Morgan, right? You really look outstanding. Wendy's dad didn't put his efforts in vain. Come with me to visit your father later." Morgan looked a bit embarrassed and couldn't help but give me a hateful look at this moment. Auntie was also wiping her tears and choking up. "Your current achievements are worthy of Wendy's dad's efforts. Back then, when you were about to take the college entrance examination, your little girlfriend wanted you to fight for the family property to support her to study abroad. Your family didn't have enough money, so Wendy's dad and his wife borrowed 100,000 yuan from us to send her away and also made sure she didn't break up with you first." Morgan was a bit stunned when he heard this and couldn't believe it. He was suspecting if I had colluded with them to slander Hannah. However, Auntie ignored him and continued, "Alas, who would have thought that ungrateful wretch would break up with you as soon as she got the money? Fortunately, with Wendy's care, you were able to pull yourself together." Auntie took Morgan's hand and patted it firmly. "Morgan, you should treat Wendy well. Only in this way can you live up to Master Wendy's dad's spirit in heaven." Morgan's mind went blank at this moment. After a few seconds, his voice filled with disbelief rang out. What did you just say about the spirit in heaven? Master Wendy's dad and his wife were so kind. How could they just pass away like this? After hearing this, the corners of Morgan's mouth trembled slightly, as if he was trying to force a smile. No, it can't be. Master was still fine when I left. How could he pass away suddenly? Uncle and Auntie, are you colluding with Wendy to deceive me? That's right. You must be acting. Uncle Jack was a bit surprised to see Morgan's somewhat crazy appearance at the moment. Morgan, you didn't even know about such a big thing as your father's death. Morgan looked at me with empty eyes. No one told me. I walked up to Morgan, my eyes filled with tears, and the slap mark on my face was clearly visible. Morgan, don't you feel guilty when you say that? Morgan was forced to look away by my gaze. He took a step back and stopped only when he hit the shoe cabinet. I ignored him and turned to Uncle Jack and his wife, saying, Uncle Jack, Auntie, let me take you to see my parents. In the graveyard, Uncle Jack and Auntie were crying bitterly. My tears had already dried up, leaving only bitterness and pain in my heart. Morgan had already knelt in front of the tomb. Morgan, who was always meticulous and neatly dressed, was now in tears, crying like a helpless child. Perhaps I should be glad that at least Morgan's respect for my father was sincere. The person my parents had devotedly cultivated was not after all an ungrateful wretch, and I was just a parasite between them, trying to get repayment for the kindness shown, and worthless in Morgan's eyes. After crying, Morgan raised his tearful eyes and looked at me. Why didn't you tell me earlier? You knew how important Master was to me. Why didn't you tell me? At least I should have seen them off for the last time. He roared angrily, venting his inner pain and self-blame at me. I looked at him calmly, with no trace of emotion in my eyes. When I found out about my parents' death, I called you. I also called during the cremation and the burial. Only one call was answered, and it was Hannah who picked up. She said you were cutting fruits for her. I knew you had deleted my number, but I still sent you countless messages, hoping you would see them. If you had the slightest concern for me, you couldn't have not known about this. Morgan, how else could I have informed you? Morgan took out his phone with a look of disbelief. He fumbled around checking the call records and finally stopped at the record from 3 days ago. He finally saw those missed calls. He opened number and searched through it 3 times, but couldn't find my number. If you hadn't been so heartless, you wouldn't have missed these messages. After hearing this, Morgan cried bitterly again and repented in front of the tomb. As for me, after saying all this, I felt weak in my body and a sharp pain in my heart. The bloody wound was torn open again, and I once again experienced that helpless pain. After Morgan's parents passed away, Hannah took a sum of money from my home and then broke up with him. His grades plummeted as a result. My parents saw this and were very worried. I volunteered to take on the task of comforting him. I went to and from school with him, pretending to ask him questions to get him to talk. I learned from Uncle Jack's child how to communicate with boys. In order to help him out of the shadow, I privately organized small group discussions that lasted until late at night. Finally, Morgan got back on track and worked hard, and I, in the process of constantly caring for him, was attracted to him. I fell hopelessly in love with him. My parents, relatives, and friends all thought that we were meant to be a couple. We lived up to everyone's expectations, became lovers, and then got married. There were some things that Morgan didn't know, and it was Auntie who took his hand and told him. Auntie noticed the conflict between us and advised Morgan to cherish me. But she didn't know that this was our story, not Morgan's version. Since Morgan achieved success in his business, things began to change quietly. Hannah soon returned to the country and became Morgan's personal secretary in the company. Morgan told me that Hannah's joining was just for work. However, they went on business trips together, adopted a stray dog together, and reminisced about the past until late at night. And I, from a gentle and virtuous wife, became a young lady who tried to get repayment for the kindness shown. I became the vicious female supporting character who drove away the childhood sweetheart, and an unreasonable and crazy woman. We had been married for 5 years, and I had loved him for 10 years, but it couldn't compete with the lie of his white moonlight. Morgan was shocked as he listened to Auntie's narration. He had never known or noticed my efforts. Only at this moment did he realize my deep affection for him. I watched as Morgan swore to Uncle Jack and his wife that he would treat me well, that he would start over with me, live a good life, and live up to my parents' expectations. There was no ripple in my heart. I just smiled in response. I was grateful to Uncle Jack and his wife for coming all the way to visit my parents and for their care for me. But for their expectations, I could only shake my head. Now, I just wanted to get a divorce as soon as possible. Watching Uncle Jack and Aunt I drive away, Morgan cast a helpless look at me. Finally, he slowly walked towards me and said softly, "Wendy, let's go home." I looked at his torn and painful expression and couldn't help but find it ridiculous. I knew that he was waiting for me to give him an excuse to save face. As long as I said a word, he could pretend that everything was normal and make up with me, just like before, covering up all the problems. No matter who was right or wrong, it was always me who gave in first, every time I put my pride aside to prevent him from losing even a bit of face. But now, how could it be possible that nothing had happened? My parents were dead, and my heart was broken. I looked at him calmly and said lightly, "Okay, let's go back and sign the divorce agreement." Morgan frowned, looking helpless. His voice became gentle. "Wendy, don't be like this. After we finish dealing with our parents' affairs, I'll accompany you on a trip." Okay. In the past, if he had apologized to me, I would have been so excited that I couldn't sleep all night. If there was an additional reward, it would have been the source of my happiness for a month. But now, there was no emotion in my heart. "Morgan, you don't have to be with me out of guilt. It will make you feel tired and make me feel disgusted." The love I once had for him had now become a shackle that bound me. I just wanted to be free in the last moments of my life. "Wendy, I didn't know everything you did for me before. It was my fault. I apologize to you. I ignored you before. Didn't you always want a child? Let's have a child." "No, you can have as many as you want. Our parents always hoped that we would have children. With a child, we can also comfort their spirits in heaven." When I heard him mention the child, I felt even more disgusted. I had personally ended the life of our child. How could I have a child with him again? I didn't want to listen to his self-moving apology. I took out my phone and played that recording with only Morgan's voice. "Master and mistress have been so kind to me. I can never repay their kindness in this lifetime. If it weren't for them, I would have divorced a long time ago. Fortunately, Wendy's first child is gone. Otherwise, I really wouldn't know how to face her child." Morgan was struck as if by lightning. This isn't true. I didn't say that. I didn't mean it like that. "Wendy, this is voice synthesis. I didn't say these words. I can explain it." Looking at his flustered and incoherent appearance, I knew that his mind was in a mess. The sudden death of my parents, his guilt towards my parents, his misunderstanding of me, and the hurt he caused me. These emotions had already broken through his heart. I didn't want to pay attention to him. I didn't have much time left either. I thought I wouldn't have any more emotional fluctuations, until I saw behind Morgan, Hannah walked over holding the dog named Lana. I trembled all over. At the beginning, when I was pregnant with our first child, Morgan drove me to the hospital for a prenatal checkup, and I was very happy. However, on the way, Hannah called and asked him to accompany Lana to the pet hospital. Morgan didn't hesitate to leave me on the side of the road and asked me to take a taxi to the hospital alone. When I was waiting for a taxi on the side of the road with a disturbed mind, I was unfortunately brushed by a passing bicycle and fell to the ground, and I had a miscarriage. In Morgan's heart, perhaps I and the child were more important than Lana. But obviously, we were far less important than Lana's owner. Since that day, I decided that I would no longer love Morgan. But I didn't expect that she would dare to bring this dog to the grave of my parents and openly provoke me. She wanted to make me lose my mind. Indeed, I felt a rush of blood to my head, and anger almost made me lose control. I gritted my teeth and roared, "Morgan, take your mistress and get out of here." However, ignoring my anger, Hannah stepped forward quickly and said in a sorrowful tone, "Sister Wendy, I just heard about Uncle and Auntie's matter. I'm really sorry that this happened. Brother Morgan, I wanted to bring Lana to pay respects to Uncle and Auntie." Hannah pretended to be sad, but the pleasant in the corners of her eyes couldn't be hidden. Without my parents, it seemed that the day when she could take my place was not far away. I glanced at Morgan, who looked embarrassed. If he knew that I had deceived him and hurt him, I think Morgan would definitely slap me without hesitation. Then he would point at my face and scold me for being heartless. But she was Hannah, the white moonlight that Morgan had dreamed of 10 years ago. Even though he frowned and showed his displeasure, he still couldn't say a harsh word to Hannah. He just said to me, "Xiaoning didn't mean any harm. Just let her pay her respects to Master. Did he forget what he said to Auntie just now? He knew how much I hated that dog. Forget it. I should have seen this man clearly a long time ago. I walked towards Hannah. She and Morgan looked at me warily, worried that I would go crazy. I just said calmly to Hannah, "You've always wanted to marry Morgan, right? I'll make your wish come true. I've already signed the divorce agreement. Ask Morgan to sign it. You've won." As long as Morgan's wife wasn't me, I didn't care who it was. After saying that, ignoring the joy on Hannah's face, I turned around and left. Morgan grabbed my hand. "Wendy, stop making trouble. I won't get a divorce." "Brother Morgan, I told you earlier that Martin has returned to the country. Is it because of Martin that you're acting like this?" I frowned and looked at them, not understanding why they mentioned Martin, my high school classmate who had already gone abroad. "Morgan, I broke free from his hand and wanted to explain, but suddenly I felt a warm liquid flowing out of my nose. The next second, Morgan was completely panicked. "Wendy." My last consciousness stopped at Morgan's panicked cry. When I opened my eyes on the hospital bed, the figure that came into view was Morgan's. He was by my side. When he saw that I had woken up, he asked me with concern how I was feeling. He asked me if I felt uncomfortable, if I wanted to eat something, if I wanted to drink water, or if I was thirsty. All this made me feel as if I was still in a dream. Was it a hallucination when I was seriously ill or a continuation of a nightmare? However, the pain in my body clearly told me that this was reality. Morgan, who had been tired of me after 10 years of acquaintance, could be so gentle. He called the doctor, and I was given a thorough examination. "There's no cure. I'm in the late stage of bone cancer." I said calmly to him, "Your Lana is sick. Go and take care of it. Don't waste your time on me." Morgan shed tears. This big man who was 19 meters tall always stood upright with his head held high. Now, he was hunched over and kneeling by my bedside. I felt disgusted and vomited again. "What are you doing?" I snatched the tissue from his hand, wiped it myself, and then threw it away in disgust. What was he pretending for now? "Wendy, we need to talk." His voice was choked with sobs. I thought it was ridiculous. "What's there to talk about? My father is dead. Now no one can stop us from getting a divorce. You're free. Morgan, let's get a divorce. Set you free and set me free too." Morgan was silent for a long time. It seemed that he had 1,000 words to say, but in the end, he just said, "I won't divorce you. You should focus on your treatment now." I felt an inexplicable sense of irritability, but Morgan had already left the ward. While there was no one in the ward, I pulled out the infusion needle and fled the hospital. I didn't have much time left. I went home and packed my luggage simply. I wanted to see the world in the limited time I had. But when I got off the car at the airport, I saw Morgan. He was still wearing the same clothes. His hair was messy, and there were bloodshot eyes in his eyes. When he saw me, he seemed to heave a sigh of relief. "Wife." He walked quickly towards me and gently hugged me in his arms, as if I was a fragile treasure. I pushed him away, filled with disgust in my heart. "Morgan, can't you just leave me alone? You love Hannah. Don't bother me anymore." "Okay." I ignored him and turned to leave, but I hadn't walked a few steps when I felt dizzy again and fell down. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in that familiar ward. The doctor told me that my condition was already very critical. The blow of my parents' death, coupled with the miscarriage. If I didn't receive treatment immediately, I might not even last a month. Morgan was stunned. In just 2 days, he had lost a lot of weight, as if he had shed dozens of pounds. His eyes were red as he asked, "An abortion?" The doctor was taken aback for a moment and then replied, "Yes. The examination shows that Wendy had an abortion. The embryo was approximately 3 months old." Morgan suddenly turned to me, as if he had remembered something. The appearance of this child was an accident. He hadn't been close to me for a long time. Since his white moonlight had appeared, he had only felt disgust towards me. He especially didn't want me to get pregnant with his child. But that night, he was drunk. It was the tenderness that I hadn't seen for a long time, which made me mistakenly think that he had changed his mind. However, during our intimacy, he held my face in his hands but called out Hannah's name. He had just mistaken me for her. Perhaps he hadn't made a mistake. It was just that the longing in his heart had caused him, who was drunk, to confuse dreams with reality. I still remembered the expression on his face that morning when he realized it was me. Hate wasn't even enough to describe it. It could even be said to be ferocious. Just deal with it yourself. Don't leave a child to disgust me." With these words, he turned and left. That was the beginning of my complete despair towards Morgan. I took birth control pills, but I didn't expect that this child would still tenaciously stay. I ended his life with my own hands. "Did we once have a child?" Morgan asked softly, his lips chapped and his voice hoarse. He looked at me with so much sadness in his eyes that it seemed as if it would overflow at any moment. "Wife, why didn't you tell me about this?" I was at a loss for words and just shook my head in his despair. "We had 2 children. You've forgotten." Yes, he had forgotten all about it. The child we once had. He suddenly woke up with fear in his eyes. He said to me shamefully, "Wife, don't think about it. You just focus on your treatment. We'll have children in the future." I didn't respond to him anymore and turned around to lie down. Late arriving deep affection is cheaper than grass. I didn't need it. The days of chemotherapy were extremely difficult. Fortunately, the time I was awake was getting less and less. Morgan had arranged a VIP ward for me. Every day, he personally brought me my favorite red roses. As the president of the company, he stayed by my bedside all day as if nothing else mattered. On the verge of falling asleep, I vaguely heard his subordinate reporting. There was no time for him to have contact with his wife, and there was no opportunity either. Moreover, Mr. Martin has a boyfriend. I endured the pain and turned over, and my consciousness sank into the darkness again. Martin was back. This guy once asked me to pass a love letter to Morgan, and as a result, he was severely beaten up by my sisters. It was quite funny. Time passed in such a chaotic manner, and the time I was awake could be counted in hours. I was getting thinner and thinner, and my hair was falling out in large handfuls. Even the nurse who injected me couldn't help but have red eyes when she saw my appearance. But I didn't care. Soon, I would be able to be reunited with my mom, dad, and baby. I was very happy. However, Hannah didn't seem to be happy at all. Just as I woke up this day and took a small sip of the warm water brought by the nurse, the door of the ward was suddenly pushed open. Hannah, with exquisite makeup, stood in front of my hospital bed and angrily questioned me. "Wendy, what exactly did you say to Morgan?" "Morgan fired me from the company. Is it you who's playing tricks behind my back? You bitch. You can't stand to see me happy even when you're on the verge of death." I looked at her calmly. "Are you done? If you're done, please leave." My indifference made her lose control instantly. "I'm warning you. Don't think that your little tricks can change anything. Morgan loves me. He's just taking care of you out of guilt now. As soon as you die, he'll marry me." Hannah rushed towards me excitedly, wanting to attack me, but was stopped in time by the nurse. When Morgan arrived, Hannah had already been firmly controlled by the nurses. She immediately ran towards Morgan and pretended to be pitiful. "Morgan, I just came to visit Wendy. I didn't expect her to treat me like this. I know she doesn't want to lose the title of Mrs. Song, but I'm truly in love with you. I don't care about the title." At this moment, there was an unprecedented look of disgust in Morgan's eyes. Perhaps this was the first time he had looked at Hannah like this. I planned to use the remaining half-year of my life. Hannah was stunned, seemingly unable to understand Morgan's words. "You're divorced. That means you're no longer husband and wife." Morgan nodded. "Yes." Hannah looked at me in confusion, and I faced her calmly. Hannah was filled with shock. She knew very well how deeply I was in love with Morgan, but she had never expected that I would be so resolute in the end. In order to sow discord between me and Morgan, Hannah had gone to great lengths, and she had almost succeeded. However, she had been too hasty. When the truth came to light and the lies were exposed, the hurt was even deeper. "Call someone to send Hannah away." The security guards entered as ordered and were about to take Hannah out. She looked at Morgan with pleading eyes. "Morgan, I had no ill intentions. I'll explain it to you later." But Morgan looked at her with a firm tone. "There's no need. Hannah, from now on, you're not allowed to step into this city. Otherwise, I'll make your family fall apart. I mean what I say." Hannah was taken away by the security guards amidst her crying and shouting, and Morgan never cast another glance at her. Morgan handed me the divorce certificate. I showed a long-lost smile. Morgan looked miserable and said to me, "Wendy, I'm sorry." I looked at him with a smile. "I should be thanking you." The end.